thanks for joining me today. It's Kathy, and I have a new tutorial to share with you. And I'll be using the June 2017 My Monthly Hero kit. And we're going to be creating 5 different cards. And we're going to be using this small tree to create a couple of variations of bonsai trees. We're going to get started with the first card. And I have the stamp on my acrylic block, and these are the colors that we're going to be using for the most part: Wild Wasabi, Garden Green, and Soft Suede. Alright, so what I do is I load up the top part of that tree bunch with the Wild Wasabi, and then the bottom part, where the loopies are, I just load the ink up down below there. So I actually have 2 colors on the stamp once I'm finished inking it up. But just make sure you swipe off the trunk part of that stamp, because you don't want that trunk to appear. And if you do get a little bit of a halo of the trunk there, that's okay, because we're going to be cutting out that image anyway. Here is the double color that we're stamping. And you can actually just do 1 color at a time if that makes it easier on you. So I'm just going to show you a couple times with the 2 colors. And see how I have a little bit of a halo left over because I didn't quite take it off. But that's okay. It'll disappear. So just showing you one more take where I've actually shortened it up after I loaded all the colors. And then here's where I do the 1 color stamp. And then the Wild Wasabi over top, or you can go the other way. Stamp Wild Wasabi first and then do the bottom part. Okay, and then the Garden Green, I just load that up and then swipe it. And then just leave a little bit where the loopy part is. And that will add depth to your image, and the image will somewhat start popping out instead of looking flat. Just kind of keep doing that to build up the colors. I do that on the bottom part of those loopies with the Garden Green, and then I also add a little bit on the top. So I go reverse, and you'll know what I mean as I keep stamping here with the Garden Green. So that looks pretty good. Okay, and then we're going to create the branches, and I'm just going to show you that you can actually do the branches using that tree trunk. And this is actually the first time that I did this. I actually like to challenge myself. And it did turn out pretty good. But the rest of the image, I'm going to finish it off with the Stampin' Write marker in Soft Suede. This is where you need to create that curve to give that bonsai look. So I'm just kind of sketching that in with the Soft Suede, and then to darken it up and fill it all in, I use the chocolate chip marker. And then to get it to look more bonsai, I'm going to extend the tree bunches over on the right. I'm just filling in some of the, or actually what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of stamping a bunch of times with the Wild Wasabi so that it kind of all blends together. So here's where I'm extending 2 more bunches to the right, and I did stamp the Wild Wasabi first, and then the Soft Suede, and then the Garden Green, and just kind of blended it all together, and then hand drawn in the branch. And I'm just going to do 1 more here. Yeah, I'd have to say that the projects today are not as easy. It does take some imagination and some patience, and be prepared to have inky fingers. And here's where I'm really stamping a lot more with the Wild Wasabi just to fill in the white spaces, and that ties in the tree, and then we're ready to cut it all out. And then once you're finished cutting that out, I just use the dark marker just to cover up any white spaces or white parts of on the edges there, and then I sponge the tree too. Okay, and then to create that moon, I used the dye from the kit, and then I did sponge it in with a yellow and a red. And then to create the background for this card, I used the ink cube from the kit, but I did end up covering up the majority of that with garden green. And I'm going to do a little something else to that later on, that part. But I'm just going to finish off the top part, and I used Daffodil Delight and Tempting Turquoise for the sky. And with soft suede and this template that I made, I'm just going to swipe along the edge there, and then I'm just going to kind of fade it all out, just so that we have something that will ground the tree. And of course I can't leave well alone. I'm just going to swipe it with my marker on top of that just to add a little bit more. And then we're going to glue down that moon. And then I also foam tape the tree. And then for the sentiment, I use the It's Your Day sentiment from the Paper Pumpkin kit. And I just white emboss that. And all the cards are top folding, 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2, except for the third card, which is a side folding card. And we'll get to that in a moment. So that's our first card. I think it turned out really good. My sister came over and actually saw it and thought I actually painted it. So that was a really nice compliment. All right, so we're going to move on to the second card. And for this one, another variation of a bonsai tree. So we're going to do a couple of variations today. We're using the Hero Arts White Unicorn Pigment Ink. So this one's just a tad easier to do because we're only dealing with one color. And I'm just kind of loading up the image with the white ink. And I am kind of stamping, so that way you don't have any harsh lines from the white pigment. And I wanted my image to be as white as possible. And I think that this ink actually works quite well. So I'm very pleased with it. And then just swipe off with your finger if you want to make smaller tree bunches. So once you finish your tree layout, I'm using this white pigment ink marker by Recollections. I had it in my stash forever and I was quite surprised that it actually worked. So here I am creating the shape of the bonsai tree and then just creating some of the branches. And we're just going to kind of sketch out the shape, and we're going to color in the tree later on with the pigment ink. So here's that swoopy part of the bonsai. I would say it was just a little bit too curvy for my liking, but we're going to go with it. Okay, and just adding a bit of detail with that marker in hopes that it will stay. And then I just hit it with my heat gun for a bit, not too long. And then here's where I used the Fantastic Stick and loaded it with some white pigment ink and filled in that trunk a bit. And then I thought I would add some more detail. Unfortunately, it doesn't stay though, because once it dries, it just kind of fades. It does look good right now. I really like that whiter detail on it, but it does fade. So this is a couple of hours later, and it's pretty dry. And most of the detail has gone, but just a little bit is there though. Okay, so we're going to hand cut that out, and then we'll just sponge along the edges just to clean that all up. And then I did die cut another moon, and this time I'm going to show you how I colored that in quickly with Daffodil Delight and Real Red along the edges. And what we're doing here is we're going to create a smaller moon, and I found it much easier to do the bigger one and then color it in and then die cut it. So we're going to place the 2-inch die over on that left top part, and then we'll just glue it onto a black cardstock. And then I also foam taped the bonsai tree. Now this one is not going to be grounded, but we're going to go with it. And then I used the same sentiment from the Paper Pumpkin kit, It's Your Day. So that's our second card, and it's a little bit easier to do. So if you wanted to try this one first before you do the first card, so that you get comfortable with creating the tree. I think that's going to be the most challenging part, the tree and the branches. Okay, so for the third card, it's all about the scene here. I'm just going to color it in with the Real Red. And then I'm going to use black and just color it, sponge it all in there. It's mainly the top part that we're interested in. I did go a little bit too far over, but that's okay, towards the red. And then I used the edge of that applicator to create those lines. So this is somewhat the vision that I had for this card. So we're going to let that dry, and I'm going to color in another white card panel with Daffodil Delight, and we're going to die cut this one out. And you can do this in different variations, but I decided to go with this. I die cut a circle first. That's a little bit smaller than this die. And what I wanted was the bottom part to not cut out, that last, I guess, cloud piece part. But I was a little bit too close with my plate there, so that's all right. And anyways, I put it on my trimmer and I cut it at the 1-inch mark. Just make sure it's straight before you cut it. And then with a black piece of cardstock that's 5.5 inches wide, and it's about two inches tall. I just kind of cut across that and then swooped upwards for to create a little hill there, or a mountain. And then that copper piece is from the kit. That's cut at 5.5 by 2 1/4 inches. Okay, so those mountain pieces, I'm just cutting those out, and then I'm sponging the edges to give it some depth. And I did glue down the back part pieces, and then also the front two I did raise with dimensionals, except for that little one. I just glued that one down flat. And we're going to use this stamp set, and we're going to use the Thinking of You sentiment, and I did emboss it with white embossing powder. And then here's the tree, just a simple tree, using the same technique from the first card. I thought it looked pretty awesome. I did use some yellows in the background, so it made the tree nice and bright. Okay, so we're going to move on to card number 4. This one is pretty easy. It's just a 1-step stamp card. We're not going to be cutting this one out as long as you don't mess it up. Because it's just one color, it'll be so much easier and you won't have any halos. So once you lay out the tree bunch pieces, I'm ready to draw in my tree branches and the tree trunk. And I did use the basic gray marker to sketch out my tree branches and the trunk. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm just gonna color it in with the black marker so that it all ties in together. And I thought it was missing maybe a couple of branch or tree bunches there, so I do end up stamping 2 more once I've finished coloring it in. So I stamped one there and one there. So now it looks, it gives it that more of a bonsai look. All right, and to create this moon, I decided to just kind of die cut a 2-inch circle on a piece of cardstock, and then just hung on to it and then colored it in. And then I created a little halo afterwards. And then I used the It's Been Too Long sentiment from the Hero Art kit. And that is our card. So this one, a little bit easier than the first one still. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last card. I came across a photo on the internet, and it really inspired me to try to recreate the image by using the stamps from the kit. And I'm going to use this tree bunch. And it is 2nd generation stamp using soft suede. And then I just kind of stamp the lower part of that tree and just building that trunk all the way down to the ground there. Okay, and then we're going to stamp another one that's a little bit shorter. And we're going to build that trunk again. And I do have a little bit of remnants left from that top part of the tree, but that's okay. You're not going to really notice it. And then we're going to use this smaller tree from the kit. So we're going to stamp that behind the tall ones. And then for the next ones, we're just going to remove some ink and we're going to make it shorter. So just make sure it's shorter as we go towards the center. And then this one is a baby Bob. So he's pretty tiny. And then with Pear Pizzazz, I decided to add just a little bit of color on the top parts of the tree. It has a bit of like a grayish tone, so I thought it worked out just fine. And then with Basic Gray, I'm stamping the little guy in the center of the road. And then with my chocolate chip marker, I'm just adding some details and filling in some parts of the tree trunks. So just kind of add a bit of a curve at the bottom of the tree trunks to give it a more realistic look. Okay, and then with So Saffron, I'm going to color in the road or shade in the road. And then with the small dauber with a bit of brown on it, I'm just shading along the edge there and then grounding the trees and also the little man. And then with the black marker, I'm just going to draw the dark shadows along the edges of the road. So this is fun. Wasn't hard at all. And then the road there is super straight, so I'm just going to add some unevenness to it with that marker. Okay. And then for the sky, I shaded in Tempting Turquoise. And then the midsection, Daffodil Delight. And then Real Red with a small sponge dauber. But just make sure you don't have a lot of red on that because you want it to kind of be a lighter red color. Okay, and then I decided to, and I was scared, to restamp the guy, but then yes, I got a little bit of ink on my acrylic block. So I had to cover that up, and I decided to throw in the little elephants, and then also I put in those cute little monkeys and the little birdies on the top. All right, so I backed it onto a Island Indigo card panel there, and yeah, I think it turned out great, but I didn't really know where I could put a sentiment, so I thought I'd just leave it as is. Okay, so here's a few stills of the card, and I think the Basic Gray on the little guy worked out just fine instead of black. All right, and here's a summary of all the cards that we created today. I hope you enjoyed today's video and got inspired using the My Monthly Hero Kit. Thanks so much for joining me today. Bye for now.